Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the last day of June and another big SHRM event. I have a few little notes to talk about this morning, and we'll move right through the process. So today's webinar is approved for 1.5 HRIC and SHRM professional development credits. And of course, today's broadcast is being recorded. We'll share that link with everybody, and we'll also be putting it out on the SHRM webpage, so you can go back and look at that anytime you'd like. I just wanted to say that we've had a couple of glitches getting credits, and we've rectified the situation. So should be getting those credits out to you rapidly. Shouldn't have any issues. If you do have one, if you are looking for credits, please reach out to me, and we'll get that straightened out. So appreciate that. We do have some news. We do have a new COVID-19 resource center, which is on the website. A lot of hard work went into making this site. I think it's award-winning, and you're going to get tons of information there. The center contains articles on best practices, checklists, FAQs, forms, guidance from state and federal agencies, and links to SHRM content on COVID-19. With regards to, say, terminations, layoffs, remote work. So we will continue to update that site constantly, and please take a few minutes, peruse that site, share it with all your contacts out on social media. It's a really great way for us to build our membership. We do have a few upcoming events. July will be coming to an end. We'll finish up the month of July and take a break in August. So in July 14th, we have defined contribution trends, developments and case studies. It's going to be a really interesting talk. So I would share that with CEOs, CFOs, and of course our HR professionals, benefit folks. It's going to be a good one. And then we'll resume our fall programming with the Diversity Inclusion Conference, September 3rd, and then the legislative conference in September. I'd like to thank our gold sponsors. We're always so proud to have these folks with us. Bryant University, College Bound Saver, Tufts Health Plan, and the Hill Group of New England. And I'd like to thank today's host, who has been just doing women's work behind the scenes all year, hosting these webinars since we have gone to a remote format. So thank you so much, Christine Canine from Higher Image, background screening specialist. We appreciate all that you do behind the scenes. And now I'd like to finally, please join me in thanking today's sponsor, Capital Wealth Management. Appreciate your today's sponsor, and I'd like to turn it over now to Rebecca Records, who will say a few words about Capital Wealth Management. Rebecca?
Thank you, Scott. Good morning, everybody. Capital Wealth Management is really happy to be sponsoring this morning's meeting. I'm hoping sometime soon we can all meet again in person. My name, again, is Rebecca Records. I'm the Director of Retirement Plan Services at Capital Wealth Management. Our firm, it specializes in company retirement plans. We're located in West Warwick, Rhode Island. So I primarily work with managers like yourself, and I know that you wear typically many hats, and then you add in a pandemic, and it's pure chaos. So I'm sure your focus over the past few months has been trying to connect with your employees and maybe writing up new policies and procedures on working from home or possibly reopening the business. I wanted to share with you today just a few successes that we've had working with 401k HR participants and HR managers. And I'm hoping that maybe you take something away from the successes that we've had over the few months working with our 401k retirement clients. The first success, and it seems basic, is just assuring that your participants have an advisor that they can speak with that is easily accessible. Through this pandemic, I think everybody has learned their efficiencies and inefficiencies in their company, and what we learned is reaching out to participants in the past was, you go on site. We then implemented this technology. It's called Calendly, Calendly, and it was a great way to scheduling virtual meetings just like this, a Zoom meeting, a go-to meeting, and having access to participants that integrates with our calendar and their calendar. They click on a link and they're able to schedule a one-on-one meeting with us as their advisor. So I would encourage you to ask your advisor, what are the ways you're reaching out to our employees, our participants? What is the virtual conference room? Making sure there's a great, smooth, efficient way for participants to connect with the advisor, because now more than ever, they really just want assurance that they're in the right investments based on the risk tolerance and time horizon. Seems pretty basic. The second thing is everybody knows about the CARES Act, I'm sure by now. But what we've created for our clients that they found helpful is really customizing a summary that fits the needs of their retirement plan. So not every retirement plan has loans available or hardship distribution. So customizing a CARES Act summary, if unfortunately you've had to lay off or furlough anybody, it's a great way to give them retirement money, and making sure the advisor's contact information is on there. I'm sure you don't want to be the person to giving them advice on which the best avenue to take out money if they need to. So having a professional that's able to give advice during these hard times, I think is really important. So maybe ask your advisor if they could create a customized CARES Act summary for you in your plan. And then really the last thing, in your next upcoming meeting with your advisor about the 401k or whatever type of company retirement plan you have, is trying to get a pulse on the health of your retirement plan. And what I mean by that is asking for some stats that typically maybe you want to ask, but because of these times, I think it's important to know. Three things that we're including at all of our meetings with our clients is, first, we're getting a list of how many people have actually taken COVID-19 related loans and distributions. The second thing is how many people have actually stopped their deferral rate. That's kind of a big red flag if all of a sudden you have maybe a third of your participants just stopping the deferral rate. That means they're not really getting the advice and the assurance they need to continue to save for their retirement, even through these volatile times. And then the third thing is how many people are actually panicking, selling out of their stocks and going into money market. If you see a lot of that type of movement, that's kind of a signal that, hey, you might need some more education for your participants. So I would encourage you to ask your advisor in advance of your next meeting for those three particular stats. So I hope that was helpful for you. We're here as a resource for you at Capital One Management. I know Christine has my contact information, so please feel free to reach out to us if you have questions. And I just hope everybody stays healthy and well, and wishing everybody much success personally and in the company in the upcoming year. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. Appreciate your sponsorship this morning. And so on to today's event, which is going to be very interesting. I'm really looking forward to this. It is my pleasure to introduce Todd Knapp and Christine Scarafoni. Todd Knapp is the founder and CEO of Envision Technology Advisors. Todd has been providing IT services nationally for over 20 years. Todd speaks throughout the country on a variety of technology and business issues. And he founded his firm in 1998 and today enjoys engaging with his teams on technology transformation projects and representing almost every business vertically. Christine Scarafoni has over 25 years of strategic and hands-on experience in human resources and leadership development. Christine serves as Chief Human Resource Officer at KLR. Wow, really? One of the largest accounting firms in New England. She's an experienced leader in building human resource infrastructure from the ground up, building high-performance teams and effective collaboration to accomplish these business goals. It is my pleasure to welcome Todd and Christine. Good morning.
Good morning.
Scott, thank you so much for having us. And I got to tell you, I chuckled very slightly there for a moment because every time somebody says that I started my company in '98, I suddenly feel old. Because for like the longest, I started my company when I was turning 20. and I was just a baby when I started it. And for a really long time, part of my identity included that I was a really young person running a company. It's not as true as it used to be. um, so I'm going to share out my screen, and we got just a couple of little housekeeping things here I want to jump into. So give me just 1 second here. There we go. All right. So our conversation today is on the changing role of human resources in a post-pandemic world. And honestly, whether it was pandemic or it was just the natural evolution of time, I think that the things that we're experiencing now, especially as they affect human resources, were inevitable. I think that what's happened with the pandemic is that it has accelerated some things. It's driven some adoption and created a clarity of understanding for people about the direction that the world was already headed in anyway. So because I am in, yes, I am a business owner, and so I spend a lot of time thinking about human resources. And my father is a psychologist. I'm very focused on the human-centric side of what I do. But the smartest HR person that I know is Christine, so I thought she would lend some really great insight to this. See what I did there, Christine?
Thanks, Todd. That was awesome.
First thing in the morning, little bump to the ego there. All right. So I am Todd Knapp. I'm Envision's founder and CEO. You just heard a little bit about me, but just a couple of quick housekeeping things. First of all, if you find the conversation interesting at all, you are welcome to email me directly if you have follow-up or want to talk more about it. And certainly, if you follow us on our social media, Facebook and Twitter, you're going to get a continual stream of information from Envision about what's going on in technology. And I would encourage you, even though you're not technologists necessarily by trade, what I would say is that our social media is really not geared towards IT people. It's geared towards the world. It's geared towards human beings. So, you know, I think you'd find some valuable stuff there. Along the way today, I'm going to have several times when I'm going to ask you things. There's a section on your menu bar for the GoToWebinar control panel where you can type in a question. It's not just questions, it's also going to be answers, because one of the eccentricities of GoToWebinar is that the chat feature isn't available for regular attendees. It's the questions versus GoToMeeting. So I have some things where I'd like your input. I don't love slide decks where it's just a talking head. So we're going to try and get you guys to give us some of your feedback. And then Christine, I'll give it to you for a second to give us a little of your background.
Sure. So Christine Scarafoni, I've been in the human resources world for probably almost 30 years. So most of it was in banking prior to getting into the CPA world. And today I want to talk about, you know, our role and how it's transitioned over the years. And I started when HR was just kind of coming out of personnel into human resources, and we've been, you know, people management, human capital management. We're the creator of fun. You know, we've been trying to get that seat at the table, and we acquired that seat at the table. And now it's our time to really reassert our leadership skills and help create the new way of working, which is what Todd and I are going to talk about. You know, we're going to talk about being agile, being a distributed workforce. This is our normal, not our new normal anymore. This is our normal. So I'm looking forward to answering any questions you may have and sharing, you know, things that I'm learning over the way. You know, it has been uncharted territory for all of us, and we're learning as we go. Excuse me. And I'm really excited to be able to talk about what we've done, what's worked, what hasn't worked. People will tell you that I tend to be a little cautious, but right now it's cautious, risk. You just sort of have to go with it and figure out what works best for your company and how we progress to the future. So Todd, I will turn it back to you.
Awesome. Yeah, you know, in talking with you over the last few days, you've said that a couple of times. You said new normal is normal. And I think so. I don't know if you're seeing my slides or not, Christine. I don't know which view you're in with, or because you're a presenter. But you know, while you were talking, I jotted down new normal and I crossed out new and circled normal. I echo that sentiment in a big way. You know, when this started 3-4 months ago now, or 3 months ago anyway, most of the webinars that I was asked to sit on were, let's talk about the new normal. Let's talk about what the world's going to be like. And I would argue that in so many ways we're here. So I don't love talking about things as if they're yet to happen. I think that now is the moment. So I absolutely echo that. So the premise of our conversation today, and what I really wanted to, you know, spend time on, is we all understand what the pandemic is and what that's done to our world day to day. But I don't know that we always think about sort of the impact that it has on these three areas. When I think about, you know, priorities and expectations, I mean, you know, Christine, clearly, you know, the priorities and expectations of our staff is impacted by what's happened. But, you know, in addition to that, I would argue customers. What do you think about the executive side of the house, Christine? How much do you think that they're impacted?
I think they're impacted a lot because they're trying to figure out how, you know, they continue to run their business, manage their staff.
Yeah, and so, you know, the groups that I think are really have had a realignment of their priorities and expectations are the staff, customers, the executives, and the managers. And I actually separate the executives and managers in my thinking. Christine, you may have a different opinion, I don't know. But, you know, when I think executives, I think, you know, business owners, the high level of the C-suite. When I think managers, I'm thinking about the people that are really in the trenches with the staff, trying to keep everybody marching to the same drum and you know, and keep them effective. You know, when we talk about impact to culture, there's some language I've been using recently where, you know, I think the two big words here are isolation and juxtaposition. And the reason I think those are the two big words is that, you know, when we are in a position where our physical safety is threatened by things that we can't physically see, and I actually said this to Christine last night, I said, you know, if you were in the room with me right now and you were there with a baseball bat and a scowl on your face, I'd think, wow, she's dangerous. Like, you know, maybe I'm going to keep my distance. But if she's just sitting in the room with me, you know, short of the fact that that I think she's got allergies this morning and she's coughing, I might. You know,
I know. I was fine a few minutes ago. Now my throat's all like.
Now you're coughing. Come on, Christine, hold it together. No,
No. Okay, I'm good.
You know, in the normal circumstance, if Christine's sitting in the room with me smiling at me, I can't tell if she's dangerous or not. But in a world of sort of post-pandemic, where I've been forced into isolating myself for protection, I begin to not trust people that I've trusted my entire life and not trust circumstances that I've trusted my entire life. My very best friend that I literally, you know, he's a buddy of mine that I've been in scuba diving with for you know, decades, known him forever, great guy. He and I hang out, you know, pre-pandemic, you know, almost every weekend he goes, you know, he's on, you know, I live on a boat in the summertime. He's on the boat with us. We're going diving. We're teaching scuba together. We're both instructors. We're doing things together a lot. Now, you know, the first, you know, when he said, hey, I'm having a little get together on my deck, there's going to be 3 people there. And he takes this very seriously. I know he takes it seriously, but I still had this moment of like, am I comfortable being around this person that is really important in my life? Am I okay with that? You know, and the fact that I'm even questioning it, I think emphasizes that juxtaposition that, you know, I'm now across the table from essentially everybody. And I think that puts our culture at risk as businesses. Would you agree, Christine?
Absolutely. I think people are feeling the isolation what do you do? What can you do? What can't you do? I personally escaped for a month. I say that because I left Massachusetts and went to Florida because I felt that I could be less isolated. They were open, they were more free, but it's still the sense of I really didn't do anything different than I was doing up here because I don't know the people other than my sister. You know, golfing with people, what do you do? Do you ride in the same cart? You can't ride in the same cart. So your whole personal life has, and your work life have become so vastly different. And, you know, who do you talk to? Or if you go to one of these events, are people going to socially distance? You know, because there are people that don't feel like we feel. And that's our own employees, it's our friends, it's our family. So it's, as Todd said, it's truly this juxtaposition. You know, what do you do? Who do you talk to? And if you're like me and Todd, we are extreme extroverts. And so losing that piece of being able to pop in someone's office and talk, you know, I'm a firm believer in the management by walking around. I'm a talker. I talk to everybody. And so when you don't have that, how do you keep your culture, which for me is very, very important? How do I keep it where it needs to be so I'm keeping everybody engaged and motivated and still part of my life without, you know, getting in their space? So it's definitely very different.
Yeah, so you know, I think that impact. I think the culture is the first thing that we lose as a result of what's happened, and I think HR's role. You know, the conversation I really want to have today, and I took some notes while you were talking, of things that were popping into my head. I think it comes down to a conversation about expansion of skills that in HR we haven't had to lean on as heavily as I think you'll need to in the future. I think it's development of some new skills potentially for some people. And I think it is a change in the role when it comes to leadership within the companies that I really am excited to talk about today. So this is the, you know, I wanted to start by kind of framing up for everybody kind of where we're coming from in the conversation. And if that makes sense, do you have anything you wanted to add to the HR role, or do you think I nailed it, Christine?
I think you nailed it.
I'm not a morning person at all, so I'm like, this is me being pumped up. Yes. So I mentioned that you know, I've got a long history that's connected to nonprofits and human services. I've, you know, early in the business focused the company on those things because they're things that are important to me and that I'm fascinated by. And if I hadn't gone into technology, I think I might very well have gone into psychology because it, like I said, the human centric side of me. And I think to Christine's point, I'm an extrovert. I like people. I like interacting with people. And so I'm fascinated by human behavior. So everybody in HR at some point has seen Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Maslow was a psychologist, and he developed this hierarchy to talk about how we process the world around us. And the basic premise, just on the off chance that there's someone on the call that isn't familiar with it, is that the lowest level of Maslow down here is where we begin as humans. Our first priority in life is to focus on our physiological needs. Air, food, water, shelter, sleep are examples. If we can't sleep, if we don't have access to food and shelter, at that level, our very existence is threatened. Our lives are threatened. And so we don't think about processing anything above that. We don't worry about our employment when we don't have, you know, shelter or water or food. We focus on, I need to eat tonight, right? And so Maslow says, you know, that the way that we get to self-actualization is by essentially ticking the boxes on each layer below it in succession. So once we have our basic physiological needs, then we can move on to our safety needs. And employment is in that list, right? Our health, our personal security, and our employment are in that list. So you could really really argue that in fact, that in fact, we are all living down here right now in some ways. Our health is threatened. And so it's really distracting for us. It's hard for us as employees and employers to think above our safety needs right now and the safety needs of those around us. So one of the things I started thinking about, Christine, was, when as a business owner, when I look at Maslow, I think to myself that actually my business has a Maslow hierarchy of its own. My business as an entity has things it needs to survive. And over the last 22 years, I've aligned my business's Maslow needs to my human Maslow needs in order to manage my employees and myself. And I did it without even thinking about it. I think every company everywhere did. There's lots of business owners that would say Maslow who, but they don't realize it, but this is what they did. And so, I started thinking, what does that look like? And so the lowest level of Maslow for a business is market demand and an ability to deliver. If I don't have market demand, my business doesn't exist. And if I don't have an ability to actually serve that market, my business doesn't exist. So when market demand is threatened, it's hard for me to think about anything else. And I think a lot of us in the business community have been here lately. I think that, I've got clients that are in industries that are very, very impacted by this. I have customers in the travel space and the airline industry that are, that woke up and suddenly there was no market. Nobody was going to travel. I don't know if you watched the news this last week, but the EU basically said, sorry, America, United States, you're not welcome. So their market demand is threatened. So do you think they're really thinking above market demand right now? Probably not. But if you've got market demand and ability to deliver, then you have to have people that are capable of executing on that delivery, and you need to have the right tool sets for them to do that job. But capable people, that isn't alignment with things like love and belonging, family, friendship, community, culture, which would be above that, right? So that's where you need to take those capable people and turn them into a trusted team. And that's, I think, that one of the central jobs of human resources, unless you disagree, Christine, is taking a collection of people whose skill sets tick the boxes and turning them into a team, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So once we get that trusted team, that's where we then start to get to the point where people can build on the next level of Maslow, start to get to respect, self-confidence, and status, which is really about recognition. And recognition that your company is successful and known in the community as being an expert. Everybody wants to be in that company that everyone says, oh yeah, they're the go-to people for X, right? That's one way that we feel recognition is when our company is recognized. So, we've got in Rhode Island the best places to work. And I know both KLR and Envision have been involved in that for many years. That's a form of company recognition that helps our employees feel good about the place that they work. But it's also about how we recognize our people as individuals, and how we as managers and business owners and HR professionals tell our people that, hey, you're doing a great job. And it's how their colleagues tell them they're doing a great job, which could be as simple as, oh, thank you so much for your help in that meeting the other day. If you hadn't spoken up, I was really lost, right? That's a peer interaction that helps them feel that sense of self-confidence, that sense of respect. And so then you get to the highest level of Maslow, self-actualization for an individual, which in the corporate world, achieving one's full potential might mean having a career, having reached the apex of their career path. And that's different for everybody. For some people, that's, earning a lot of money. It's entering the C-suite. It's, achieving some certification, whatever that is for each individual person. For a business to help people get there, that's where the business is profitable and it's doing something meaningful, right? So that's sort of the highest level of Maslow, because we've all seen companies that are very profitable, but are not meaningful. They're terrible places to work. Do you think anybody in those companies reaches self-actualization? Probably not, right? So you need to have those pieces and parts. So I bring this whole thing up, Christine, to ask you this question. Do you think that the effect of the pandemic is going to require a total rethink of how we achieve on the business side each one of these pieces and parts for our companies.
Absolutely. I think that companies are going to have to establish a new way to continue to meet the needs of their business as well as the needs of their employees. So with everything that has happened, again, it was uncharted territory. And I think companies have to be more agile and think about, where do we want to go? How do we move and grow our company and meet these, that market demand? I mean, that's a prime example. How do we change on the fly what we do in order to still be successful? So I think when I look at this and I think of just KLR in itself, we were able to, we know that we want to keep our culture. We knew that we wanted to alleviate the fears of our employees. We also knew that we were hitting the time, which is our busiest time of year. And so we had to do everything on the fly, which was going, distributed. So we were all not in the office. We closed the offices. Everybody had the ability to work from home. I had been, since I got there about a year and a half ago, really hiring the right people with the right skills, not necessarily just the people from the right school, but people that were, that showed me that they were willing to work hard, that they had the skills and were able to fit in our culture and wanted to grow the firm as well as themselves. So we were able to sort of build that team. Recognition is something that we've done, and we've seen it even more now of almost daily. I'm getting emails saying, so-and-so did a great job. They did this in, this amount of time and excellent. And it's going out to the management team, our partners. So people are doing that public recognition. And as Todd said, best places to work. So we had the surveys come out for best accounting firms and best places to work Rhode Island, which we participate in. And this year, you would think, okay, everything has changed. We had the most participation ever in people completing these surveys and really wanting to talk about what we did. And so we had 85% participation in one survey and 78% participation in another survey. Thrilled that our employees want to recognize the firm as well. So you can really see that when you're able to meet their needs, how it translates over into helping to meet our needs. As long as we keep that line of communication open, we're transparent, and you're able to see how, Todd's picture here is, his image is perfect on how they kind of grow together. And, so I think that it's so meaningful to see this.
Yeah, and I think that the part of the thing that I was thinking about when I was doing this, and something I think about with KLR because KLR, I've been involved with KLR since the very beginning of my business, and I've seen that company grow. I think about how the creation of that trusted team and that culture and the enablement of capable people and the right tool sets and recognition, how those are so very dependent on the way in which we do business. We've been face to face for a very long time. We need new ways to think about these pieces. So I guess the question I would ask you guys as a group, this is where you're going to bust out that question section in the right-hand side in your GoToMeeting control panel there. Just do me a favor, take 1 second here and type something in. Where do you believe trust and loyalty and community come from? So if you don't mind, taking a second and popping that in there for me, while we do that, I'll ask Christine the question. In a group of people, where do you think that trust and loyalty and community come from, Christine? While we wait for some answers from our audience.
Sure. So I think, well, because my experience over the years, and I've stayed at companies for, a long time, most companies, and then a few a short time. Trust, loyalty, and community come from, I think it starts from the top down. So it's, people that I work for, people that I work with, people that share information with me, knowing that the vision and value system of the company, they help grow the trust and loyalty. Working together, I love my team. I have a great team, and I've been very blessed everywhere I've worked with great people that work with me, work for me. And it's, as you have listening, it's understanding who they are as a person and, getting to know them and building that trust. So we're going to talk later about predictive index and assessments a little bit. And there's often times that, people don't trust very easy, and helping them learn to trust, which is, being open, talking to them about what's important to them, where they want to go, what they want to do, what their goals are professionally and personally. So I think all of that comes into play on where trust, loyalty, and community comes from. Having the company that you work for treated as like one company. So again, banking, I've worked in banking for a million years, and when you have 30 branches, it's trying to, from the top down, what's our goal? Where are we trying to go? Where is this company going? And so, shared goals is perfect, because that's one of the things. If you know what you're aiming for, what you're working towards for the success of, yourself as well as the success of the company, that's where that, that loyalty and that initiative and motivation is going to come from. Hey, I want to see this, because we're all in it together. And I think that's how we all feel now, is we're all in this together. So I think that's actually sort of building that loyalty even more, because we're all, we're here, we're all going through it at the same time. And, empathy, we can all empathize with each other.
Cool. So a lot of what you were saying, I'm sure you saw me jotting as you were talking. These are all things that came from the audience. There's a ton of great answers here. And my apologies to anyone if I missed what you wrote, but I kind of grouped some things together. Yeah, peer-to-peer interaction, successful teamwork. I would even argue that unsuccessful teamwork can sometimes create loyalty if it really was teamwork. Overcoming obstacles is one of the things that that a psychologist would tell you builds trust and bonding. Leadership, listening, actions that align to words. I love that. That was me shortening up what somebody said. Somebody said, let me see if I could find it here. Oh, I see integrity was just added to the bottom. I like that one a lot. But there was somebody that made a comment about people doing what they said they would do. So I said actions that align to words. Working towards a common mission, transparency, soliciting opinions, shared goals, respect. I really liked this one. I thought this was a really interesting response. And I'm going to find the exact language, because you need to feel it to experience it. I thought that was a really interesting comment. And empathy, which was your word, Christine. I think these are great answers for everybody. Thank you guys very much. And so here's what I would pose to you as a challenge, I suppose, in some ways, is that, as an outside person, I'm not in your industry. I'm a technologist, and I am a human-centric technologist. And so an interesting thing that I've observed over the years is watching across my 1,100 customers how different businesses and different leadership teams develop trust, loyalty, and community. And all of the things that you see here, peer-to-peer, That's always or traditionally often been done face to face. Teamwork often has involved being in the same room with the group. Leadership has often been standing in front of the team and getting everybody excited. Active listening is one of those things that again, we've always traditionally done in face-to-face ways. And I'm not saying exclusively. Certainly, we've all worked in companies that have branch offices and where we have to do some things that are not face-to-face. But a lot of what I'm seeing here is stuff that we've traditionally handled in person. And so now we have to figure out how to do this. And the language I use with people is that when we talk about where loyalty and trust and community come from, that it's built professionally on a lattice work of literally thousands of micro interactions that are unplanned. And I've actually studied this. I've spent time researching it. I have a gentleman on my staff who went to school for psychology. I have a psychologist in the family, but I also know a number of neuroscientists and human services professionals. And I did some research when this began. And I said, what studies are out there around how we build professional trust, loyalty, and community, and in turn, culture. And there are lots of papers about what's referred to as incidental interaction. And incidental interaction and that lattice work of tiny micro interactions, some of you have seen me speak, have heard me recently talking about this. It's me walking through the halls at KLR when I'm there to visit somebody and seeing Christine on the other side of the room and just throwing her a little smile, and she smiles back at me. We didn't plan it. We didn't even walk up to each other. It was just a little, literally could be measured in a second or two. It might even be a micro expression and not even be a full second. But there's a whole conversation there. And the conversation was, hey, Christine, I'm really glad to see you. And I value you as a colleague. And when she smiles back at me, she's reciprocating that feeling. And so we've built a little bit of relationship there. And then some other time when she's walking in the building and I grab the door and hold it for her, there's another moment there of, hey, I want to help you. And so it's a million tiny little things that we can't plan for, that we can't deliberately create, that actually build trust, loyalty, and community, and in turn, culture. And so the threat to our businesses in the world we have now inherited, not the new normal, but in the normal that we have now, the threat is that this distributed workforce, this agile workforce, is a permanent part of the economy now. There will be some portion of your teams that are not coming back to work. And in fact, we're going to talk later about why you might not want them to. There are some advantages there. When that's the case, we have to figure out as professionals, executives, human resources people, how to make those things on that list possible in new ways. So I think it begins with talking about our terminology. So Christine, let's play a game. What word feels better to you, remote or distributed?
Distributed.
Yeah. Tele or agile?
Agile.
See, some of you might have picked up on this. This is a trick question. It was a loaded question. She knows the answers already. It's a total setup.
Nice layout.
Right. So I've been having conversations with schools recently, and every school was asked in Rhode Island to develop a plan for telelearning and remote education. And one of the very first things that I said to the schools is, we need to stop talking about remote education and just start talking about education. Does it really matter where we are when it comes to learning? Can't we learn from anywhere? Don't we learn from anywhere already? I mean, the number of things I've learned in my wood shop can be counted by some of the scars on my hand. I've learned in all kinds of settings in my life. When we use the word remote, there are some synonyms for remote, right? I would argue that a synonym emotionally for the word remote is the word isolated. Isolated is not a good feeling. I don't know why there's an I in isolated. There's no I in isolated. There we go. Isolated is a bad feeling. The word remote makes me feel like maybe I just crashed on a deserted island and I'm all by myself. Remote implies that everything real is happening over here and I'm way over here. That's not a good way to feel. So I think it begins by, as professionals starting to purge language from our executive teams that they understandably use naturally. Oh, my employee's working remotely today. Are they, or are they just working? I mean, does it really matter? So what do you think, Christine? Is that an important distinction?
I think it's absolutely an important distinction. When we talk about workers that work, distributed, whether it's a home office or a different state, or as I said, I worked from Florida, from my sister's house for the last month. No one knew, or I'd say very few people knew that I was there. So I was still part of the team. I didn't feel isolated from my team at KLR or the leadership team that I sit on. But it is, my sister's worked remote for 10 years, and it has been difficult because you are isolated. You're not always included in the group. You tend to be that afterthought of, oh, we should have gotten so-and-so on the line. Let's have that quick meeting. So if you look at it differently, as they just have a different office space, they're just, wherever that might be, they're still part of the team. You're going to bring them back into the fold, and they're going to feel part of that, as the last slide, that community. So that's what we want to be able to do, is make everyone feel that they're part of the community, not make them feel segregated or separate.
Yeah, so I tend to use the words distributed workforce and agile workforce to define the structure of the organization, but I no longer ask the question, is someone working remotely? We have an office availability plan at Envision, meaning that starting in June, we had made physical changes to the office to allow for distancing. We divided the staff into groups and created 2 teams or 2 groups, a blue group and a green group, and we set up Monday, Wednesdays blue, Tuesdays, Thursdays green, and this was our phase 1 office availability plan. Important distinction, like I said, what we say helps define how we feel. We started with a return to the office plan, and then we said, well, wait a minute, we don't even care about that. That's not what we're trying to accomplish. We wanted an office availability plan because we have some people who really want to be there, and we want to make it possible for them, when it's safe, for them to be there. But I don't actually want to force anybody back in. So, we said, I don't really want a return to work plan. I want an office availability plan. And so we built that, and we launched that in early June. And right now, there's a handful of people that go in each day. It's scheduled, it's coordinated, so that there's safety there. But I don't ever think of them as in the office or remote. We have a distributed workforce. We have an agile workforce. The word agile is a great word. It's fast, it's fierce, it's capable. You hear, I jotted down because this is a National Geographic word. This is like that deep voice, the puma is an agile cat. It's like, we think agile, we think effective. That's great language, right? Everybody wants to be agile. Nobody wants to be remote. So, as we think about our office availability plans versus our return to work plans, as we think about the structure and the language we use with our people, I think this is a great place to begin. So I mentioned we would talk about some reasons why you'd want a distributed workforce. And there are some very good reasons why your people are not all coming back ever. And maybe there's a company or 2 on here that are going to bring every single employee that they had before back into the office for some period of time. But if you do, I'm arguing that you're more or less delaying the inevitable for lots of companies. I mean, I think there are some businesses, if you're a manufacturing company and you have machines on the shop floor, then yes, I understand that. If you are a restaurant and you have service, I understand that. I'm talking about professional service organizations I don't think that there is a world where long term we don't have a distributed workforce. And part of the reason for that is, number one, this first little icon that you see off to the left. This was to remind me to talk about resiliency. What happens when the next pandemic occurs? What happens at the next hurricane, fire, flood, terrorist attack? You know, I speak all the time on a wide range of topics. 2 years ago, I was doing one on business continuity and disaster recovery, and I rented the theater at Gillette. I had 100+ people in the room, and I said, you know, every time I sit down with a board of directors to talk about business continuity, they always want to talk about fire, flood, terrorism, hurricanes. And the problem with those things is that those are all pretty regional. And I said, you know, let's take 15 minutes right now and talk about something that doesn't usually get discussed in that meeting. Let's talk about pandemic illness. This is 2 years ago. And I said, you know, what would happen if the entire world had to go home? I said, you know, that's very different than a hurricane, fire, flood, or even a terrorist attack where, you know, after 9/11, there was a start, there was a discrete end to the immediate threat, and even though there was the fear of future danger, there was also a group we could point at, you know, pretty quickly that we said these are the bad guys and they're responsible, and you know, this is the area that was attacked. It's very different than an entire planet saying, you know, all of our communal health is threatened. So, you know, we had this 20-minute discussion about that. And when people left, they were like, hey, thanks for the doomsday story. And they were joking with me. And a lot of them have called me since and said like, oh, I can't believe we're living out your worst case scenario. And I've had to say, I don't mean to be like the harbinger of doom and gloom, but we're not. This is not an airborne virus. This is a virus that travels in close proximity in aerosolized you know, liquids. This is not a virus that can survive for 16 hours on the wind and can travel from your neighbor's house to your house, whether you see them or are distant from them or not. There is a worse scenario than what we're living through. And so, you know, I think about, does having some portion of my workforce be distributed all automatically make it easier for the easy things like hurricanes, fires, and floods, which we used to think were the hard things? You know, now, you know, if my workforce is distributed and truly distributed, if I had employees that were all over the country, if there's a hurricane in Florida, I might have a couple employees that are impacted, but not the whole team. If I have a fire on the plains in the Midwest, or if I have employees in California and there's a fire and they're not all there, then you know what? We're okay. Business continues. So resiliency. That national workforce is the second icon. One of the things that we talk about in my industry is, you know, we're in the business of technical support. Wouldn't it be great if we hired some people in California? I mean, we know that we can work easily from anywhere. So why do I care where they are? Let's hire them in California. And then guess what? Their normal workday starts at 11 and ends at 9 my time. And so now my technical support hours, without adding a second shift, just went from the 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. range without changing anything, right? By the way, you know, what about the role that we have that we need you know, I don't know what, you know, who the person is, could be anybody, right? Maybe I need a new bookkeeper, or I need a new administrative resource, or I need a new project manager. And in the past, I've always hired only here in Rhode Island and Southern Mass and Eastern Connecticut. And maybe the PM I'm looking for is very specialized and hard to find. And so, you know what, here in the Northeast, that role costs us, you know, $165K to bring that person in, whoever that person is, because their unique skill set is so specialized in New England. Maybe there's a ton of them in South Carolina, and that role in South Carolina brings in, you know, 85K. I don't know. We know that the markets are different in different places. Guess what? Someone in your team is going to say, hey, there's money to be saved here. There's a world in which we could save some money by hiring people in different markets. And then let's not forget too that the advantage of a distributed workforce is we get to go where the talent is. I don't have to be limited by what's regionally available to me. So there's some huge advantages associated with a distributed workforce. Now, in the world we're living in right now, there's another reason or two that your people may not come back to the office. First of all, the youngest generation of employees that are in their 20s right now never understood why coming to the office was a priority in the first place. Day one, they didn't understand that. They're like, what are you talking about? Like, they've attended classes remotely in college. They've done, they've worked from their dorm rooms. They've done, online education. They've learned from anywhere. They've never understood why coming to the office was a mandate. Second, you're going to have some population of employees that, and I was actually having a conversation yesterday with a CEO that I respect quite a bit. And I was talking about my job, and I was saying that the things that I love most about my job are some of the first things that I lost. I love interacting with my people in person. I love that when I'm sitting in my office, even on a bad day, I can hear people laughing just on the other side of the door from me. And people poke their head in and say something funny to me, or we have a very cash office. A paper airplane might make its way through my window sometimes. You never know what might happen at Envision. I love that. I have lost that. I also, in 2019, spoke in person at almost 50 live events. I love getting in front of an audience and getting them jazzed up and seeing them get excited about something they've never seen before. I can't do that right now. So I was saying, it's been really impactful. And the CEO that I was talking to said, yeah, the stress levels are at a place that we've never seen before. And he said, there's a population of people that I fully expect are going to be diagnosed with PTSD on the other side of this. There's probably going to be a lot more diagnoses of agoraphobia and other similar social conditions that, where there are people who just can never again be comfortable in a crowded room because they just don't know when, there are people who got sick with this. There are people who lost family members from this before anybody was actually calling it a pandemic. And so they're not sure when the next thing's going to hit, and they're going to be traumatized by it. So guess what? Those people not coming back to the office, not interested. So, we've got these great reasons why we might have a distributed workforce. There's also these others that are out there. I think there are risks attached to a distributed workforce in addition to benefits. We've already talked about this loss of culture one. I think we've beat that horse pretty sufficiently right now. There's an inefficiency conversation when it comes to technology and processes. If yours is a company that didn't plan the technology well up front, and why would you necessarily? You may not have ever thought about it because you weren't planning for a pandemic. I think that's fair. You may have processes right now that don't lend themselves well to a distributed and agile workforce. You may have technology right now that doesn't lend itself well to a distributed and agile workforce. And Christine, without throwing under the bus the wonderful work that your company's IT team did, you guys used a virtual desktop technology and continue to use a virtual desktop technology that positioned you really well to be able to work. Has it been flawless?
No.
No. Are you in it right now?
No.
Right.
So,
Why?
Actually, it just does not work well for any type of live technology, Zoom, webinars, mostly because it's virtual. So it looks for things that are virtual. So in my office, I have speakers and a microphone and a camera. So the system can't figure out how to automatically adapt to, oh, we're not there, we're here. And so I have to go outside of virtual, plus it's very choppy. So I end up having to forward emails from my work email to my personal email that have the link so that I can do these and I can get the good camera and the good microphone. So, but it was convenient to be able to, have that ability. My previous job, you actually had to be assigned to VPN, and only a select few people had it out of a workforce of almost 500. I think there were only 20 that had VPN, and so totally not prepared to when this happened. They didn't have laptops. I mean, we gave all of our employees laptops at our year-end summit in November of last year, which was phenomenal to be able to do that. So plus, they got new laptops, and they were able to work, from anywhere whenever they needed to. So that
Talk
was
about fortune, huh?
yeah. So that was very fortunate.
No, nobody planned, but hey, it worked out. Yeah, I think you said some really important things there. And what I was getting to was that I think you guys had really good technology that's lent itself really well to continuing to maintain effectivity and productivity despite what's going on, but it's not flawless. And
Right.
there are some big limitations there. And I think when we conceived of the technology as an organization more than 10 years ago, it was to solve for a problem we had 10 years ago. But now the problem has changed. And so it's time to rethink that technology. And I know there are a lot of people on this call that had, remote technologies, VPNs, terminal servers, things that were intended for the person that's occasionally out of the office or the small population that's on the road. And we're not prepared for everyone to need to leverage it. The other thing you made a comment there about was forwarding things from your email to your private email, which I know for you is just meeting invites, and you're very careful about that. But we're going to talk about security in a few minutes. That's one of the things to be thinking about. And you also made a comment around, some of the type of technology you have right now doesn't see all the resources that you have available to you. So from a morale point of view, I think there's an impact there. And so we're going to talk in just a moment about the role of human resources as it relates to technology. And I think everyone needs to keep that comment in the back of their mind. Where I want to keep us moving. So let's just touch real quickly on this one down here. Ineffective managers. Let me tell you what I put on there, or why I dropped that on there, Christine. And in a few short words, you can tell me if you agree or disagree. Risks in a distributed workforce. I believe that you have, I don't mean you specifically, I mean us, the larger you. I think we've all got people in the organization that we hired because they were dyed-in-the-wool, tenured, experienced professionals. They came from the right school. They worked in the industry for 15, 20 years, and we know that they are great at getting in a room with their team and just getting those people moving in the right direction and managing that group. I'm not sure that same group is necessarily wonderful at managing and maintaining a population of distributed and agile workers. I think that there is going to be a shuffling of the deck that will need to happen, where we're going to realize that there are people in our organizations that were phenomenal managers prior to this event that maybe are no longer the right fit for the job. What do you think, Christine?
I absolutely agree. I think we're seeing it, now that we have these managers who we thought were wonderful, as you said, and now that they can't see their staff, you see that they are not able to really manage because they were really kind of micromanaging. We didn't see it because when we think micromanaging, we always think about somebody looking over our shoulder. But, as I said, I love to manage by walking around. Well, when you can't do that, you have to be agile and be flexible and figure out a new way to manage. Some people cannot do that. So I think that we are going to start to see the manager of old isn't what works in our normal of having a distributed workforce. They need to be managed differently. There's more autonomy, but there is also, you still need to build that, trust, loyalty, and collaboration with these individuals.
Yeah, I agree. And, so when I think about all of this, it brings me back now to, let's not forget about our customers. We spent a lot of time talking about our employees. Our customers' expectations in what they would perceive as the new economy and their impact on our employees on the things that's happened at Envision is I've got account managers and sales reps. And one of the things that they asked really early on was, hey, when can I call my client and schedule a face-to-face again? Because that's how they're used to doing business. And, one of the things that I said to them was, you need to, if you walk into a room with a prospect and ask them a very personal question, and put them at risk of feeling uncomfortable, is that a good sales tactic? And everybody said, well, of course not. And I said, so let me ask you, in a world where everybody's not sure if they're safe in a room with other people, putting them in the position of having to say, I'm sorry, I don't want to be in a room with you, is that a comfortable thing? Right? So everyone went, no, I guess not. And so I said, right. So we're not going to ask to be in the same room with one of our customers or prospects, because when we do that, we're putting them on the spot. We're making them be the one to say, sorry, I'm not comfortable, which is it's a more gentle way of saying, sorry, I'm scared. And nobody wants to admit that they're scared. So, we talk about how the questions we ask impact the way our customers and prospects feel. And so that relationship building and what the customers expect from our people drives what our managers need to be thinking about. That's why I think there's risk with the management team. I think that it's challenging for the employees when the managers are dyed-in-the-wool folks who have been doing it the same way for 20 plus years, and they're dying to get back in the field and get back face to face with people. And at the same time, some of our employees may not actually even be comfortable. And so they may not feel okay stepping up and saying, I'm not comfortable doing this. And I think there's a whole world of potential hostile work environment suits out there at some point that, I understand that, are you afraid of pandemic is not listed under protected class as far as I know. But I do think that anytime that we put our people in a position of feeling uncomfortable in the workplace and feeling uncertain about whether they can vocalize that, we open ourselves up to liability that we don't want. And so I think that that's why this management thing is a discussion. So let me ask a question of the group again, and we're going to do the same thing we did last time. I'm going to ask Christine concurrently and let Christine answer while you guys are responding to me. How do you guys think everything that we've just talked about is going to impact the hiring process? If you were going to go out and hire for 5 new positions today, what do you think you'd need to do differently than you've done in the past? Or what should you focus on more than you used to? Christine?
Okay, so this is the exciting part. For me, unfortunately, this pandemic has really opened our eyes to the hiring process. I've always been technology forward thinking, so I like to use technology. So it has opened, we can hire across the world, in essence. We can advertise anywhere, we can have people work anywhere, we can do virtual interviews. So where we used to do the phone call, we do the phone screen, and then you have people come in. Now we can have a Zoom call and do a panel interview in a matter of minutes, and people can be interviewed anywhere. They can interview when they're on vacation if they want, because they don't have to worry about coming to the office. You can do, Spark Hire does the video interviews, which can be live or they can be recorded. I think that you're able to really be able to see the person still and get that non-verbal, the body language, because you're able to watch them, through a camera. You can still see them. So you're not missing out on any of the normal, I want to hire somebody. You can do them at times that work for all of us. So the one thing that I have found is, when we talk about being an agile workforce, is I don't have to work exactly 8 to 5 or 8:30 to 5:30. I work when it works for me. So as Todd said, he's not an early bird, I'm an early bird, but I have scheduled interviews that have worked for the individual, so it's not impacting their day. Where if you were in the office, you all know, we would have, okay, well, I have a 10 o'clock opening, you can come in at 10 o'clock. Well, if you are trying to hire that passive candidate that's still working, that may not work. So now you can say, oh, we can do the interview at 5:30. They get out at 5. They don't have to worry about a commute to get to your office. So I think it has, the technology has been great We are able to do everything that we did beforehand. And, we have, we use predictive index, which has helped this as well. And that's all online and virtual. So there's no filling out any paper. It's 2 questions. So I think that we have really been able to, jump on board and, without missing a beat when it comes to the hiring process. On top of that, so now you've hired them, we do all the onboarding remote. We've actually hired, I think, 3 or 4 people since this, we've been a distributed workforce. We have hired them. We send everything out electronic because, again, we have the technology to do that. So all their documentation that they used to sit and handle in front of us gets sent electronically. On their orientation, they get trained via Skype or Zoom. They're on with our IT person who's walking them through how to use some of the systems. Then they're on with us in HR doing their orientation, and we're even scheduling virtual breakfast and lunch with people that they're going to be working with. So, how awesome is that they can have breakfast or lunch with their manager and everybody's wherever they need to be. So no one's worrying. It's not isolated. We're still giving them that same experience, that same exciting onboarding experience that they had. We're just located in different places. So I think that this has been great, and I can definitely see this continuing, so that if we do need to hire someone from, as Todd said, in California, I'm going to work a schedule around their time because I can, and they're going to feel like they are getting the same exact experience that anyone was going to get, whether they were in Massachusetts or Rhode Island or California, and they're going to see and meet people on their team.
So there's some really good answers that came out from the audience. Again, you guys are great. I'm totally digging the responses I'm getting from you guys. So things that I saw in there while you were talking, Christine, and I would stand behind everything I heard you say. The virtual versus face-to-face is a big issue in the hiring process, and connected with that is this comment around how to leverage technology for interviews, which you just talked about extensively. Out-of-state hires is something that we might consider doing differently. How we assess cultural fit is one of those challenges. I saw flexible availability. I thought that was a really cool comment, and the gist of that comment was, how do we make ourselves more flexible to fit the availability of the person that's interviewing? Creative interview process, I love that. And we'll talk more about that in a second. And this one at the bottom, I'm really, really glad that somebody wrote this. Recognizing limitations for people who don't have access to the technology or can't interview virtually. That's a really interesting question. Because one of the things that I asked actually an HR professional and attorney recently, is I said, what do you think is going to happen around age discrimination lawsuits in the coming 24 months, where you have a generation of people who didn't grow up with this technology, some of them are not comfortable with it, and now one of the mandates of the job is to leverage and use this extensively. And I think that they are at risk, even greater risk now, of a younger generation of managers saying, is this person even relevant anymore? And what they're really saying is this person too old? And that's unacceptable. And so there's a whole world of issue there. Let's also not forget about people who have visual impairment, auditory impairment. Do the systems that we have support that? Does, for example, and don't answer the question, Christine, because you may not know, but I do. Do the virtual desktops that KLR uses support screen readers and ADA compliant access technologies, right? If that's going to be the primary vehicle for working from home, then as HR professionals, we actually have an obligation to make sure that our technology is ADA compliant. If we've got intranets where we're going to require people to use them to do things, if we've got schedulers, they have to be ADA compliant technologies, right? So there's some things there. I made some notes of my own. assessing the technical talent of the candidate, doing practicals. We're a technology company. One of the things that we do now in the interview process is I want people to join our meeting in Microsoft Teams because that's what we primarily use. Halfway through my interview, I'm going to send them a link in the chat and say, you know what, we're going to drop out of Teams. I need you to join this Zoom call. And then halfway through the Zoom conversation, I'm going to drop it out and have them join my webinar, my GoToMeeting, and we'll meet that way. I want to know that they can use all the platforms that my clients are going to use. That's a practical. It's a tech assessment, but it's a practical. And then competition. Let's not forget this piece. But let me tell you, those people all have bigger life problems than they've ever had, especially as long as the pandemic continues. They're not just working from their homes, they're working from their homes with their kids that are trying to learn from home, with their spouses that are trying to also work from home at the same time. And maybe there's an office in the house, maybe there's not. They're working in their living rooms and their kitchens. They've got life challenges that we didn't plan for. And so they are going to be looking for the right company as much as we are looking for the right employee. And so one of the things I've heard several CEOs say to me now that I think is a mistake is them saying, well, with all these unemployed Americans, we can find we'll have no problem finding a new employee. I just don't think that's true. I think that how we set ourselves up is going to matter big time.
Mm-hmm.
So we've only got a few minutes left because I think the goal was to get everybody out of here by 9:25. I'm just going to jump through some of the technology pieces I wanted to mention. Expanded skill sets that I think are worth looking at. And Christine, you can kind of give me like the thumbs up, thumbs down on some of these. I think the technology piece is a bigger deal, and I would connect it to the video conversation. I think HR needs to actually have some things that marketing has traditionally had. Marketing has often had somebody who understands how to create videos. And they might be, internal PSAs, they might be external marketing videos that go up on YouTube. I think that we need that skill set turned inwardly for the organization. I think we as HR professionals are now in the business of marketing heavily to our internal resources because those incidental interactions aren't there as much as they used to be. I think the gamification piece is important for a generation of people that's coming into the workforce now. They're in their 20s and early 30s, but they grew up with gamification. They understand leveling up. They understand digital badging. If you don't know what those terms mean, digital badging and leveling up, you should absolutely look into digital badging for sure. Digital badging is a way that we create essentially credentialing within our organizations for achieving milestones in your career, right? And we've done it. We used to do it with actual pins in some companies, a pin that said, 10 years of service. Now it's done with digital badges. Community building and creating incidental interaction opportunities for our people is part of the expanded skill set for HR. But the reason I'm calling it expanded is you guys all did this for years. You understand community building. You certainly understand assessment and technology and all these pieces and parts. But I think that the way we use them has changed and needs to change. And so we have to grow some of these skill sets. I think there are still HR people out there in the world that have a lot of paper forms and have an employee manual and are using conventional approaches of, oh, we're going to bring in lunch today. Well, you can't bring in lunch for everybody anymore. So we need new tools for community building. And I want to, briefly show you one or two of the things that we're doing. This is the most important thing I wanted to communicate to you folks as human resources professionals. I had a meeting with a board of directors about 3-4 weeks ago. It might even be 5 now. It seems like every day is blending into the other. And they said, hey, we need to have a meeting about reorganizing our technology for the future because we don't think that this is going to end anytime soon. And we want to optimize and streamline it. And we're worried about it. And I said, I'd love to have the meeting, but not without HR in the room. And everybody just kind of like did one of these. And they're like, well, we have the technology committee. Our CTO is going to be there. Our director of network services will be there. And we're going to have the CFO and the operations guy. right? So that's the team, and that's the technology team I've been talking with for years. A CEO or a COO, the money person, the technology people, that's usually the folks in the room, maybe one or two departmental stakeholders, but they're there as much for token presence as anything else a lot of the time. I said, absolutely no way am I having this meeting without HR in the room. And the reason is that you guys, you know, as Christine said at the beginning of this meeting, you guys have a seat at the table, you've earned it, you worked for it. You have, on the cultural side, the buy-in and understanding from the executive team of what your role is. You need to be advocating loudly that your role now needs to be expanded to be on the technology steering committee and have a serious voice in that conversation. Christine is responsible for the morale and the well-being of 250 people, Christine?
Correct. Yeah.
Right? And that's just the employees, right? We're not even talking about the impact of their happiness on their families. You know, you start to expand it out, there's hundreds of people that you have some level of responsibility for their happiness and well-being. And so, you know, if you know that the tools you need to do that include a specific type of video technology and include tools for gamification and digital badging and those things, and that's not in the technology steering conversation, then we've got a serious disconnect between what the business needs and what the business is doing. And so alignment of technology to business goals, the business plan has always been the conversation in my industry. And in my industry, I'm arguing to other IT professionals that it's not about just lining it to the business plan. It's about aligning it to the HR plan. What is the strategy HR has for building culture and community, and how does our technology support and enable that? And if it doesn't, then we've got the wrong technology. I don't care how many of the features match what the business needs at a business level. If we can't manage it, manage the HR side with that same technology, then it's the wrong thing, period, end of story, right? So it's a thought that I think is worth getting out there and advocating for in your organizations. Do you agree, Christine?
I absolutely agree. I think that, you know, our role and one of the most important things with having a distributed and agile workforce is really being able to continue with that learning and development. And if we are not at the table, we don't know how we're going to take this information and get it back to the employees. I think, you know, our role as HR professionals is, as Todd said, you know, we have to become the marketing people. We are truly, you know, the term business partner. We need to understand every aspect of that business because we are responsible for the employees. And without the employees, let's face it, we don't have a company. So our role is much bigger than any of us, I think, ever expected. And we've sort of been fighting for it all these years, and this pandemic has kind of thrown it to the forefront. So we are, you know, change management. We are those business leaders. We do need to be involved in decisions that are going on in the business. And with technology, I mean, that's what our businesses are running on. So we need to have our hands in it. We need to have our voice be heard. And then we're the ones that are going to have to take it back and, you know, how do we get it into the hands of our employees? So I'm a huge supporter for being on those committees.
Yeah, so we've got only a few minutes left, and Christine, I can't thank you enough for all the feedback you've given us. I actually am going to have one more question for you before this is out, but I wanted to use the last few minutes to talk about some of the tools available to you as HR professionals and talk about whether or not you've actually been actively involved in selecting these technologies. On the screen right now are some logos: Microsoft Teams, Crowdcast, Zoom, GoToMeeting, Skype. You know, Google Hangouts or Google Meets, WebEx, GoToMeeting. GoToMeeting was already on the list. You know, you guys are all familiar with these names. My question is, how many of you picked these technologies? Do you know what the difference is between Microsoft Teams? Why would I use Teams versus Zoom? Zoom has been all the rage, all the conversation, and then all of a sudden it was all of the security fear all in one move. right? There was this mass adoption and then this mass exodus when everyone realized, hey, there's some big security problems here. Yet there are still lots of companies actively using the platform. And by the way, it's a great platform for some specific use cases. But why would I use Zoom over Teams? Why would I use Crowdcast over GoToMeeting? Is there room in the organization for more than one of these technologies? One of the things that Christine and I were talking about is that when you're communicating with your staff, if you don't have a platform that is part of your normal communication, at Envision, you know how many meetings I've had with my team over the phone? Zero, not one. I haven't had a single phone call with a single employee since any of this began, or frankly, for 2 years prior. Every interaction we have is face-to-face. We live and die in Microsoft Teams. That's our product of choice. It fits our use case and our culture. Maybe not the right thing for you guys, I don't know, right? But that's a conversation. And it works great for Envision. And so when I want to talk with my marketing director, Jeremy, who's on the line right now, by the way, he's been quietly in the background watching the questions in case I missed one. Apparently, I've done an okay job because he hasn't spoken up. But you know, when I interact with Jeremy, in fact, Jeremy, can you unmute yourself real quick? Are you right there still?
I am still here, Todd, listening intently.
Look at that, the voice in the background, the man behind the curtain. So, you know, I mean, Jeremy, how many times a day do you think you and I interact?
Dozens of times.
And how many times are we interacting where we're not face to face?
Never. Even if it's just a very brief, 2-minute, hey, I just wanted to update you on this, being able to jump on video and actually see each other as we
If I'm in the business of managing the morale and culture of the people that work in my organization, I care a lot about which tools we're using. So, you know, one of the things I would invite you all to do is, if you want to have a conversation with me, it won't cost you a dime. I'm happy to just have the conversation because I believe in the humanity of technology. If you want to talk about the differences between these platforms, there's a whole, hour and a half of conversation just around that. I can help you understand what the pros and cons of these are and which ones fit and which ones don't. But what I can tell you unequivocally is that it is very stressful to your employee population if half of the things that they're doing are occurring on Skype and some of it's happening in Zoom and some of it's happening in Teams. They were never trained on any of these platforms. Maybe they have the right tech to use them. Maybe they don't. That's very, very angsty. You don't want that. Other tools that exist in the, what's going on with that? Oh, me, that's what's going on with that. Speaking of people who apparently don't know how to use technology, the IT guy just goofed it up. Other tools for communication and collaboration. Microsoft Shifts and Stream, Forms, Sway, Planner, SurveyMonkey. These are things that, I threw a non-Microsoft one in there because I didn't want you to think that I was just advocating only for Microsoft, but I'm pointing out things that I'm actively using in my company. Microsoft Shifts makes it more possible for me to schedule who's in the office and who's not and give them control over that. And then just the wrap-up thought for the day is, Christine mentioned, that, hey, when I get a meeting request, because my technology doesn't make it easy for me to do it inside the technology, I sometimes have to forward the meeting request out to my email. That isn't the only thing that's getting forwarded out in the world right now. You've got employees that are putting company data at risk every day. And in HR, some of that could be internal employee information, social security numbers, health information, things you don't want out in the world. Your teams need to understand how to protect information. But the problem is that human beings are inherently bad at this. You need better technology behind you that does it for you. And so the things you're seeing on the screen are tools that exist in the world. I'm not expecting you to become network administrators and IT InfoSec managers. That's not your role. I'm saying that as HR, part of your conversation with your executive teams is to say, hey, the information for our own employees is potentially at risk. We need to do better when it comes to information security. So Scott, I see you popped up on video. Do I have one remaining minute?
You do, and thank you. Go right ahead.
Awesome, cool. So let's just real quickly how do we bring new tools to bear to reinforce culture? Some things I wanted to just mention to you that we're doing, and you guys gave us such great participation. We ran a little bit longer than I thought we would, so I had intended to make a list. But what I'll say is, while I'm talking, feel free to use the questions and just pop in the things you're doing, and I'll call them out to the group. So, what we do at Envision, things we do. Number one, we've got a whole series of virtual meetups that occur at Envision that are unplanned. And we've encouraged our executive team to do that. So we use Microsoft Teams. It's a common thing for somebody to just pop a meeting in Microsoft Teams and say, hey, having some coffee, I've got 15 minutes, anyone want to join me? And random people will join. We've done things like running virtual Jeopardy games where we use jeopardylabs.com. If you don't know jeopardylabs.com, go check it out. Awesome. You can create your own custom Jeopardy board in jeopardylabs.com. I actually built one that was HR centric in case we ended up with some time today to show it to you. We do watch parties. So when SpaceX launched their first manned mission, nobody my age remembers the first steps on the moon. But that was a moment just now when for the first time a private company put humans into orbit. And 1,000 years from now, if our species still exists, we will be an interstellar species. And historians are going to look back and say, that's the day. That's the day. That Saturday was the first time humans were put into orbit by a private company. And that was where we started our trip to other planets. And so we said, you know what, we're going to bring this to all of our people. And we ran a watch party and we streamed live the event inside of Microsoft Teams and had people join us. I see someone saying that they used Vidyard to share stories with each other and to do and to share sales successes as part of their culture building. That's someone who just posted that here. We are doing one right now where we're setting up, remember I mentioned a lattice work of incidental interactions. So that lattice work of incidental interactions, one of them that we're doing right now is something we call the jukebox, where randomly we're going to identify 3 or 4 people and invite them into the jukebox for a 10-minute meeting. And the way it works is when they log into the jukebox, it's got Spotify and Pandora there. Each person that joins plays their favorite song, one by one. And the meeting lasts as long as there are songs. So 4 people, 4 songs, that's the length of the meeting, about 8 to 10 minutes. And while the music's playing, they can talk about the song and just get to know each other a little bit. And you never know what the adoption will look like. I see in someone else that says that they're doing Zoom yoga and wellness meetings. Another phenomenal use of the technology. You have to create opportunities for those incidental interactions, for that lattice work of trust to be created in order to have culture and loyalty at any level. So with that, I think we've covered a ton of ground today. Christine, I can't thank you enough for all of your insights, and Scott for including us in the conversation at all. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you both. That's a great morning. We held the attendance right through. The numbers were great this morning. We appreciate all the feedback we got from everybody. And we'll wrap it up now. We're a little over, and credits will be coming out. And again, Todd, Christine, wonderful morning. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Enjoy, everyone. Have a great day.
Have a great day.
Take care.